Music today is an atrocity, and the radio needs to stop being played. Honestly, like music used to save lives. Now it just makes me want to take my own.
I was just thinking about how much music has changed over the years and how the lyrics have gone like way downhill.
Rap music today sucks. What the hell is going on the radio? I listen to the music and I want to throw up out of my nose.
I'm talking about just the bullshit music industry. Make me fucking sick to my stomach. Make me want to vomit.
Like, we're supposed to listen to music to in to learn more about the world. We're supposed to listen to the music, feel the emotion that the artist is expressing, and take that and go out and see what we do with it.
Universal Music Group, Warner Music Group, Sony Music Group, and EMI. Together, these four music corporations are known as the Big Four of the music industry. As together, they own 70% of the music industry, and these are the four corporations you have to now sign to in order to get your music played on the radio. But who owns these corporations that control the music we listen to? Because if you know your music history at all, you will realize that most record labels in the 50s through the 80s were independently owned, with many of those record labels being owned and operated by the artists themselves. So who owns these behemoth record labels today? Well, the answer is quite simple. The government and the richest 1% of the world. For example, in May of 2011, Warner Music Group was purchased by Russian-born oil baron billionaire Len Blavatnik through his company, Access Industries. And it's Warner Music Group in particular that is responsible for pulling nearly every popular YouTube cover song, even when the artists asked their fans to cover songs for music contests, such as when the Red Hot Chili Peppers held an open contest for their fans to cover their songs. But every entry by their fans was blocked by Warner Music Group. And is it me, or is there just something naturally wrong with oil barons owning record labels? Next is Sony Music Group, which is actually the corporation that is responsible for turning the Big Five of the music industry into the Big Four. You see, until 2004, there were 5 music corporations who owned 70% of the music industry, with the 5th largest music corporation, known as Bertelsmann Music Group, or BMG, being bought up by Sony Music Group, which turned the Big Five of the music industry into the Big Four, with Sony Music Group then being taken over by the Sony Corporation of America. And it is the Sony Corporation of America that has 1,156,190 stocks that are currently owned by the U.S. government. Next up is the now defunct and legendary music label of EMI. And I say now defunct because in February of 2011, EMI was purchased by Citigroup Banking, with Citigroup Banking having 101,596,931 shares of stock that are currently owned by the U.S. government. Citigroup Banking then sold EMI to none other than Universal Music Group in November of 2011, which in turn caused the Big Four of the music industry to become the Big Three of the music industry, which now means there are only 3 corporations who own 70% of the music industry. And do you believe in coincidences? Because is it any sort of coincidence that the government-owned bank of Citigroup is the corporation that is responsible for selling EMI and causing the music industry to be controlled by a very few rich and powerful people that also have ties within the government? Now lastly is the largest of the Big Three of the music industry, which is Universal Music Group. Now Universal Music Group is the top music corporation that actually owns the most prominent music labels in the U.S., such as the Island Def Jam Music Group, Polydor Music Group, Mercury Music Group, and Island Records Music Group, just to name a very, very few. But what is most sickening is that Universal Music Group is no longer an independent music corporation, as in 2004 they were purchased by a media conglomerate company known as Vivendi, with Vivendi having 1,111,651 shares of stock that are currently owned by the U.S. government, and with Vivendi also owning leading American schoolbook publishing company Houghton Mifflin, which means the number one corporation that controls the music you listen to also controls the books your children learn from in school. Now at this point, You may be wondering what the big deal is if our government owns millions of stocks of the corporations that ultimately own the majority of the music industry. Well, let's just take a quick example from 2008, shall we? Let's say a recording artist named Nas wanted to make a new record, and he wanted this record to be some of his most societally critical work to date. So as a result, he decides to name said record Nigger. Well, as a result of testing the boundaries of human creativity, New York's comptroller, Thomas DiNapoli, threatened to withdraw all investments in shares of stocks that they had invested in Vivendi, which would have equated in over a $40 million loss for Vivendi. And Vivendi, which owns Universal Music Group, which owns Def Jam Music Group, which is the label that Nas is signed to, threatened Nas to change the name of the album or get dropped from Def Jam, which would have costed Nas hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Nas then only had one choice: to change the name of the album. Which ultimately means that our government is now determining the type of art that signed recording artists produce. And the truth of the matter is, if any of the big three major record labels that own 70% of the music industry and the radio were to sign an artist that pushed the creative boundaries of producing music, then our government could easily repeat this action and force any of the big three or their hundreds of record labels that the big three of the music industry own into compliance. For example, if underground hip-hop's most popular artist of Immortal Technique would have signed to Sony, do you really think he could have released his second album of Revolutionary Volume 2, with the cover art and musical content being what it is? The fact of the matter is this: as long as record sales stay at the historic low that they're at, which they will, then our government will have the controlling stake in the music that gets released to the mainstream, because they can withdraw the millions of dollars they have invested with our tax dollars in the corporations that decide what music we hear every day. Because let's face it, music has become much more than catchy choruses and hooks in the last 20 years. Take the 90s and the culture of hip-hop, for example, when there were groups such as Public Enemy that caused an uproar of rebellion with the music they would release, or bands such as Rage Against the Machine that had the ability to shut down Wall Street when they chose to occupy Wall Street, because of the national publicity they received from being signed to a major label. Or artists such as Tupac Shakur that would release albums against the Illuminati and people who really run our government. And honestly, it is ultimately these government-owned major labels that have misperceived the world into believing that the culture of hip-hop died long ago. Which is also why I have created the Underground Report, which is a web series in which I report on the most mainstream ignored underground hip-hop artists that are doing everything they can to keep the culture that helped save my life alive. So please, go click the video in the upper right-hand corner and help me keep hip-hop and real music alive.